Hello all. Today I'd like to share with y'all some tips on Windows. 11 of them to be exact, and it's going to make being on Windows a better experience. Alright, here we go. First of all, if you want to figure out how your computer is performing, the easiest way to look at that would be something like Task Manager. So you push Control Delete, and you see this. You can organize it by how much of your CPU it's using, how much of your memory is using, how much of your disk space, and how much of your network. I believe there are other ones. GPU, very important, and power usage, very important as well. Whenever your computer suddenly turns off and your power supply did not have enough, or your computer is throttling to stay on. And when any one of these is too high and you are overloading it, the computer will slow down overall. There will be compensations between the CPU and the GPU, because in the end they're mostly processing. So if your GPU is at 100%, your CPU will try to take over the load, and it'll make things very, very hot in the computer. If you run out of memory, then your computer will really start to lag as it deletes and adds to the memory over and over again, like a cycle, and it's trying to compensate by basically throttling everything else. So then also, if you had run out of disk bandwidth, in the same way that you have internet, where you go from one place to another, all things require the use of the hard drive to go from the hard drive to the memory, right? So if you run out of disk bandwidth, the whole computer slows down as well, because it can't get everything into the RAM, or it can't get from one disk memory space to another disk memory space. Then you have the network, which is obvious, right? I mean, if you run out of bandwidth going to the internet, your internet's going to slow down, but that's not necessarily going to slow down your computer. And you can have multiple GPUs as well, and you can see how each program is affecting your computer. So right now Google Chrome is a RAM hog, and voice macro, which is what I use to do basic things like watch this. I am sitting. Did it work? No, it didn't. I am sitting. Well, it's embarrassing when it doesn't work, but basically it oh, it did listen. I am sitting. I am sitting. There it is. Alright, so it starts a Python program. Anyway, that's irrelevant, but now you know you can use voice macros to run Python and do lots of fun stuff with voice macros. Then you have this graphical view of how your computer is being used. You will be able to see it over time, and generally speaking, you'll be able to see how many processes, threads, and handles there are, which is very, very important. So this 206 processes basically means there are 206 pieces of software running, and within each software or program there are threads. So for example, if you run Java, there's one thread, right? And you make your own program, you run it in main, and you put something like system.out.print. You've run one command in one thread. And in every high-level programming language that I know, at least, there are ways to multiply threads. So let's say you wanted to print something in a loop, but at the same time you wanted to show a counter on the screen, and you're running these two at the same time in the same .java file, in the same .class binary file, or in Python, the same .py file, running with only one compiler or one interpreter. How do you do that? Well, you use a threading library to split the program into two running processes, right? And of course, we categorize the process as the Java binary running itself, and then it splits into threads. which is what you have to do to run 2 different commands at the same time or more. So that means right now I have 2,438 processes or threads is more accurate, running at once. So that means there are a lot of lines of commands running in code. So you'll be able to see how overloaded your Windows is. So at the same time, whenever you do this in Linux, you're going to have way less processes, way less threads, and way less handles. I believe handles is a way of splitting threads, but I haven't studied it quite yet. Then you have, of course, the information about the CPU, and there is software to be able to see this type of information in more detail, and to also make it show up in whatever program you're running, like video games, for instance, where you look up an overlay. So it's like performance overlay. So if we were to look that up on Google, we could find some programs for you. If you wanted to monitor the performance of your computer or your operating system in a video game. So we could put something like gaming performance overlay, and we'll see what we get. There are some by AMD if you have an AMD graphics card, and there are many more. FPS monitor, that one's kind of simple. You want one that'll actually show you the temperature of your CPU, and it'll show you the memory and the temperature of your GPU as well. But at the same time, you can also see how much time the CPU has been running right here, uptime. So I've had my computer on for 7 days. I didn't turn it off, and I'm one of those weirdos that believes in all of that. So you can also click the resource monitor. I don't know how long this has been in Windows, but I think it's pretty cool. It's more detail on the CPU, and you could see the different types of software that are running at the same time, and just the separate ones that are running in every single hardware part. So yeah, it's not that bad, but I really don't find it that useful. I think your own overlay, the one that you get like another piece of software, is better. And you can look at your memory, see how much is being used, and how much is being reserved, I guess, right there. And disk as well. When you are looking at this, the write speed and the read speed is different per different hard drive. So right now I have an SSD, but I'm running it through a very slow cable, so it doesn't go that fast, as you could see. And of course you have Ethernet, and you have this GPU. I don't really recommend using this. It's just not pretty, and it's not what I like to use. I personally like MSI Afterburner, which you could look up on Google as well. And yeah, I'm going to be going through a bunch of different software, and some of it might catch your eye. This MSI Afterburner is one where you can control temperature limits on your GPU. You can control how much of its power it's going to be using. So these are basically throttling mechanisms, making your GPU slower on purpose in order to preserve it, make it less hot, physically hot. Or you could overload it. You could, what do they call it? You can make it faster, make it work harder, and overdo it as well, and just totally break your hardware. But yeah, it's all possible, and you could see right here the temperature as well. And I try to keep my temperature low. And you could change the fan, how much you want to use the fan. And yeah, this piece of software is pretty cool. It's my favorite one, but I don't think it has an overlay. But it's a good way to control your GPU. And that's some ways to take a look at performance. You can see how long different apps have been running as well. And now let's switch to starting up. So when you run Windows in the very beginning, you're going to find in the task manager, in the startup tab, you're going to find that there are a lot of programs that have different impacts on the computer. And yeah, this is some really basic stuff, but it's very important to optimizing a computer that, let's say, is 5 to 10 years old. You're trying to make the startup as fast as possible. So you could do that by disabling, like I don't want this right here, so I disable it. And it won't run next time I have it. So let's do this. I like that, I like that. Yeah, these are all good. And there's one way to look up what's starting up. Another way is to look up what's called the task scheduler. This right here is attacked by viruses and Trojans a lot. They will add startup and timed programs. So for example, OneDrive made a program that triggers every whatever one that is, a year or week or whatever that one is, indefinitely. So that means at this time frame it's going to start this program under actions. It's basically an updater, okay? But what happens, there are Trojans that pretend to be different pieces of software, and you get a whole bunch of these, and this loads the computer when you have too many. So I try to keep as few as possible. I think I have this one. I have this one here. I made this one, and I forgot what Speccy does, but it's something I use a lot. Speccy. Well, I won't worry about it right now if I don't. Oh, here it is. So this right here is Speccy, and it's another performance tool. I like it, but I just use it to see everything that's on my computer. So let me just type this for you, just so you can see it. Speccy. Take a look at that. Speccy. S-P-E-C-C-Y. This is another performance tool that also shows you what you need to know about your hardware and your different programming environments. And there's a lot in here. It's what I really like is the motherboard one, because that's hard to get outside of Speccy to really understand what your motherboard has. And my motherboard is from like 2009 or 2008, so it's really old and it's probably going to break soon, but whatever. That's Speccy. Alright, task scheduler. So when you see this filled up, I recommend making it a lot smaller, and this is where you could change a lot of startup things. You could just make tasks right here, create a basic task or create a task. And the basic task does this like a wizard, it just goes straight through it. The task makes it more complicated, where you can create all sorts of conditions and behaviors to your software to run with different types of commands at the same time. So yeah, I recommend checking out Task Scheduler and the startup to make sure your computer is optimized. Also, if something like this, I don't know if it's gonna ruin my OBS, but you could crash Explorer.exe. It happens all the time. I don't want to do it because of the OBS. I don't want to risk it, but Explorer.exe is actually, where is it? Where are you? Remember, there's 206 of these, right? 206 processes. Windows Explorer. This right here is Explorer.exe. I believe it's the GUI for Windows. Let me look this up. What is Explorer.exe? There we go. Let's just double check. The Program Manager, Graphical Shell Manager. There it is. Yep, I was right. So it is the GUI for Windows, and it breaks all the time. So whenever your computer lags, and let's say you're playing a video game, and then it grays out, and then it says not responding, and then you have to turn it off with Task Manager or sign out, then your this right here, the taskbar, the thing I'm right clicking where it says taskbar, it disappears, and you have to wait like a whole minute. I don't know if this is just old slow computers, but it happens to me all the time at school and at home. But Windows Explorer crashed, your GUI crashed, Windows GUI. So if you want to sort of jumpstart it, you can go to Windows Explorer in Task Manager and restart it, or end task. This restart wasn't there before, so I'm a little surprised. But before, what you had to do was end the task, go to File, Run New Task, and put explorer.exe. And you would run it, and it would restart everything, and everything would be happy dandy after your GUI crashes. Also, if you have multiple users on one computer, I think it's called virtualization. You could check that. That's some advanced stuff, I guess. Details and services. So services, these are things that are running in the background. You could turn them off and on, and sometimes you have to do this in order to reset certain services or free up ports. So I don't know if it shows ports, does it? Let me see. There is okay, so these services could take up network channels. So what I mean by that is applications can take up like a little space in how you connect to the internet. And when you turn these off and on, it can help with that. That's my main reason for using this services tool, and also for stopping something and updating it. This is for more advanced stuff. You probably won't use this, to be honest with you. But generally speaking, when you're running servers and changing ports, this is where you could find the processing ID, which is where you can go to command, right? CMD for command, there's one. And you could do something like kill, I don't want to kill one, but kill, and then you put the processing ID, which is the ID for the process to find it, and you put something like kill, let's pretend we're going to kill plug and play. Then we would put 964 and hit enter, and that would stop the program. If you lose your web server, like GUI and all that, you might have to do that. That's more advanced, but it's something to keep in mind, especially if you're going to get into managing websites on your workstation. Alright, wow, we only got to number 2. So I think I'm going to do these 3, and we're going to call it a video, and I'm just going to split this up. Oh my god, 17 minutes. I'm going to split this up. So next time, I'm going to talk about antivirus and alternatives to Office software. We can go into a bunch of other things, but for now, we'll just call these 2. Alright. I hope you learned something. This was now 2 tips on working with Windows 10. I hope you learned something.